what is your thought on whole plant fats, such as raw seeds, meaning chia, flax, hemp, sesame, sunflower, pumpkin, raw nuts, meaning walnuts, pecans, filberts, almonds, Brazil nuts, macadamians, raw olives, and avocados? That would, let's call that category 1 in their intact fats and plant-based fats. And then category 2, oils such as hemp, flax, and olive. Now, before you answer, there are people who are whole food plant-based diet people who are sort of, I guess I would call them pro fats. They speak highly of like nuts and seeds and say there's a lot of studies saying they're beneficial. And then there's some people that feel like the oils are okay as well. I'm confused why there's so much confusion on this. I'm confused why there's confusion. So where do each of you stand on category 1, the seeds, nuts, olives, and avocados, and category 2, the oils like hemp, flax, and olive?
I think there's a big difference between whole food fats that are found in nature, like nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives, and processed fats, refined and extracted oil. I have a new book that just came out called Unprocessed. It's actually the 10th anniversary. And what I tried to do in that book was make the case that even if you eat animal products, which I don't think is a good idea, we're meant to eat our food from whole plants, not processed plants. And throughout most of human history, we didn't eat processed food. And we certainly didn't eat processed oils. And so I don't understand what the benefit would be, because I agree that people need fat, but why would you need them in a very concentrated, refined form where all of the essential nutrients, the vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, the fiber, the water have been removed? And so what I say to people that say, well, I have to have oil, I say to them, is there anything that you get in this processed olive oil or coconut oil that you couldn't get from eating the whole food? And they always say no. So my feeling is if there's a benefit to the oil, whatever's in that oil that you feel you need, you could get in a better, more calorically dilute, healthier form in the whole food plant form with the fiber and the water intact. So I am for eating, not just eating vegan, but eating whole foods. And oil is not a whole food. And of course, I'm sure the doctors, and Julieanna knows, at least all the studies that Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish have done, that oil can be deleterious to people's endothelial and promote heart disease, things like that. It's very calorically dense. That's why people like it. As I said today in my talk, the more calorically dense, the more dopamine is released. But I don't see a benefit for anyone eating oil other than it's convenient if you're eating at a restaurant, but I don't see any health benefits. So I am a fan of getting your fats from whole food sources. That said, the majority of the people I work with identify as food addicts, and they can't be downing a bunch of nuts and seeds all the time like people that have never struggled or been overweight. So I recommend a more moderate amount, like an ounce of nuts a day, or even better, flax and chia seed to get their omega-3 fatty acids. Nuts and seeds are very healthy, as are avocados and oil. But those of us that have really struggled with our weight for a long time can't always moderate the use of these delicious high-fat plant foods. So I'm not anti-fat, but I am anti-oil. Oil is for cars, not for humans.
I agree 100% with everything Chef AJ said. And for those of you interested, I have a 17-minute video on my YouTube channel about why you shouldn't be eating oil, or to word it differently, who can tolerate a little bit of oil, like olive oil, in their diet. And I always say, hey, if you're at your ideal body weight, your LDL is under 70, you have no inflammatory markers that are elevated, and you have no significant, very strong genetic predisposition to heart disease or diabetes or something like that, then maybe a teeny little bit of olive oil you can tolerate. Because I mean, the truth is, some people can tolerate some without negative effects, but it doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Eat the olive, not the olive oil, just like you should eat the orange and not drink the orange juice, is what I always say. And regarding nuts in any form, whether they're almonds or walnuts or whatever, as to should we be eating them or not, honestly, the one big thing I always think to myself is while we argue over should we have nuts or not for heart disease prevention and how much and all these things like that, what's really winning is fast food and sugar and junk. And so arguing over these little points I understand people are already whole food plant-based and really highly motivated and trying to make the really extreme changes, want to know this information, but our focus needs to be just in general, getting rid of the processed foods and eliminating the animal foods. And then we'll have more people following whole food plant-based, and we could tease out more the optimal situation for the nuts, because I do think the data is a little confusing. It's not strong enough. You could argue points both ways. If you have heart disease, are nuts okay to have in a certain amount, or nuts not okay? Esselstyn removed nuts completely. Ornish had just a teeniest little bit to try to keep the total percentage of calories from fat at 10% or so. And Esselstyn's argument was what Chef AJ said, is that who can eat a small amount of nuts? Like nobody can. It's the fat taste is very addictive. So, people go nuts on the nuts. And so that's why if you just kind of eliminate them altogether, you get rid of that fat craving. And it not only helps you to not eat the fats that come from nuts, but it helps you to not eat the saturated fats and the other fats that are there too, because you no longer crave that fat taste. So in my patients that are highly, highly, highly motivated, will do anything and they can do it, I do say if they have heart disease, go ahead and be nut free. But similar to oil, if they don't have heart disease and they're struggling trying to stay in the plant-based diet, I say, well, listen, some nuts are fine, especially if your LDL cholesterol is under 70, if you're at your ideal body weight, you don't have inflammation, all these things. Okay, you could have a little bit more nuts as long as all your markers look fine. And if that's what it takes to make you compliant and stick with it because you're struggling otherwise, I kind of say that's fine to have at least a little bit more in those instances. So you got to tailor it to each individual because each person's a little different.
I include 1 to 2 ounces nuts and seeds, 30 to 40 grams of nuts and seeds a day, as per like the cardiometabolic recommendations that I've read in the literature. And it's part of my 6 daily threes, which are just like the foods that I recommend prioritizing the diets. And nuts and seeds, if you have a problem with them, there's ways around it. Like you measure them out, or you could blend them up. So that's not easy to do hand to mouth. I have a lot of my clients that have similar situation, AJ, where they can't stop. I know a lot of people that are like that for sure. And yeah, the hand to mouth. And so instead I have them blend it up and make it into a dressing or a sauce so that's controllable. And then I tap it out at 1 to 2 ounces a day. And because that seems to be supported in the evidence. And then you get your essential fats. It's a great way to get your essential fats. But I too I do not recommend oils. All of my recipes are oil free, and oil is pure fat, just like white sugar is pure carbohydrate, just like protein powder is pure protein. And we really want to eat the whole intact food rather than getting rid of the most important fiber and most of the nutrition that you get rid of when you extract the oils from the whole plants. So definitely from whole food sources. And that's what I recommend.
So I usually divide things into disease, not diseased. For people who are confronting a disease, be it heart disease, cancer or something, they go into the disease category. And for those people, I would say you want to try and keep the fat content of your diet to 10% or less. For them, you want to be super strict in terms of any added oil or anything like that. If you're not diseased, if you are just really trying to adhere to a very healthy diet, again, you want to try and have your oil exposure, as people here have already said, in whole plant food form. But I do think that nuts and seeds are and should be a healthy addition and a regular part of a healthy whole food plant-based diet. And by regular, I don't mean necessarily every day, but that they should be in the mix, because studies have shown that they have benefits. And when you look at studies on nuts and seeds, they clearly have benefits for our health. But you can get them in various forms. You can get them in visible and invisible form. What do I mean by that? You can have a handful of, walnuts, or you can grind the walnuts up and use them in dishes that you make, or almonds or whatever nuts that you're planning to use. And yeah, you want to limit your exposure to extracted oils to a bare minimum, if at all. But if you're not diseased, I think the sweet spot for the amount of oil in your diet is like 15, less than 20% of calories, maybe 15 to 20. But if you're dealing with a disease state, you want to try and be around 10% or so. I think if you try to get less than 10%, you do run into problems with getting enough essential oils. So that's my advice to people. But yeah, try to limit extracted oils because it's not good. Try to limit your exposure to fried foods and things like that.
So one last thing I just wanted to piggyback on, and I think because a lot of people listen to this when they hear this message for the first time, oh, what about this study that shows olive oil is good? What about this one? What about this? What about this one? And there's so many studies, olive oil. And almost always it's what we call a substitutionary benefit, meaning animal fat was removed from these people's diet and olive oil was inserted into the diet and there was improved outcomes. And the reason there was improved outcomes is because the saturated fat was reduced dramatically, not because the olive oil was added. That doesn't make olive oil good for you. That makes olive oil less harmful to you than the fat that came from animal-based foods. The way I kind of say it is, you did a study that kind of compared cyanide to arsenic. And they're like, oh, look, people die so much faster when they get cyanide compared to arsenic. Oh, arsenic must be good for you, right? Because not that many people died on arsenic, but all these people died with the cyanide arm of the study. All right, I'm going to go eat a bunch of arsenic, right? No. Arsenic's still not good for you. It's just less harmful. Yeah. That's all. And that's the analogy that comes up with the olive oil and the studies almost, all the time. It's a substitutionary benefit.
It's like Dr. Goldhammer always says, just because something is less bad doesn't make it good. And, I have personally never seen anyone lose weight or get healthier by adding processed oils, but I have seen hundreds of people reclaim their health, reverse their heart disease, diabetes, and lose weight quite easily when they refrained from eating oil.